All right, everybody. Good day to you. It is December the 3rd. We are back with episode 8 of the inplayLIVE podcast. Today, Pace and I are going to chat a bit about arbing and hedging. We've got a lot of questions, I think, even since day one. Everybody has questions about, what is it? What does it entail? How does it work? Is it a profitable strategy? Which we'll kind of dive into as we go. Before that, did you want to hit on anything from this past week? We had NCAA basketball launched pretty successfully. Kenny's been doing some live streams on the pro side of things. Had a couple really good NFL live streams over the last week. You broadcasted remote for the first time.
Yeah, we had an awesome week at inplayLIVE. We had a really tough day on Saturday morning, but when you're really patient and disciplined, which is like just such a common theme that we talk about, obviously.
Easier said than done most.
That's what I think is one of the biggest things is that, and that's why I harp on it so much, is that just when you talk about being patient and disciplined, when you talk about money management, the execution is what makes it brilliant, because everything about it is so simple. It's the execution that makes it brilliant. Because it's very hard psychologically on people. They always think someone else is making money right now, or I could make money on this drive, or this play, or this possession in any sport. And we were really, really patient. Saturday, even with being exceptionally patient, I think I went down $4,000 at one point on Saturday. And I think one of the things that I'm very confident with, and that's not a crazy losing run for me personally.
But
it doesn't feel
more
good.
More than half a dozen, almost double-digit units, right?
Yep.
In a half a day or a day, right? Can people feel that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think from my standpoint, I just know I'm just waiting for that right opportunity. And as I'm not finding them, it's costing me a bit of money. But then I'm being patient and disciplined, and then that right opportunity comes away, and bam, we rock and roll. So Saturday ended up being awesome. But yeah, the NFL's crazy because it's actually so unbelievably easy to make money in the NFL, which is kind of like a bit of an arrogant statement that a lot of people watching might be like, NFL's so tough to make money on, but you just don't know what we're doing. If you, right, you just don't know what we're doing. Whereas like, yesterday afternoon's game, right, the Ravens-Steelers, our volume of wagers, I think we had made 5 in the first half, and we were 2 for 5. They were at plus money, so I think we were down a tiny bit. And by the end of the game, we had probably made closer to 15 wagers, and I think we hit the rest of them, literally.
Yeah.
So we had a monster live stream yesterday, but just really showing that patience and discipline. So yeah, it's been really awesome. Yeah, like you said, Kenny's been doing the live streams for NCAA basketball. They've been a huge success. So people on the pro side, I've gotten some DMs saying people have paid for their membership for the next 2 years. I got one saying people have paid for their membership for the next 69 years. Yeah. So it's gone really well. Yeah, I'm super pleased.
Yeah, and it feels like hitting the nail on the head a bit over and over with the patience discipline thing, but it's like you cannot harp enough, especially if you're someone who's like dipping your toes in the water, learning and still trying to understand a new sport or a new strategy. Like, don't try to do it all at once.
Right.
Don't try to be a big fish. Like, build up, and do it, and start from scratch kind of thing.
Perfect example is arbitrage.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And with arbitrage, if you guys don't know what it is, it's also referred to as sure betting. I think there's a few other terms for it as well, but like
arbing, I think.
Like arbing, arbitrage, sure betting. There's a few other terms I've heard out there, and there's actually a lot of information about it. And the thing is that it's remarkably simple, right? Yeah. And when you make an arb bet, you're placing wagers to cover all outcomes of that particular event that you're wagering on.
Yeah.
That have odds that ensure a profit for you, the sports bettor. And people are like, what? How do you do that, right? And it's really simple. Different sports books use different algorithms, right, as you know. And when you use different algorithms, that exposes in a live menu different unique opportunities. And those different unique opportunities can sometimes create a profit for all outcomes. So a perfect example is if, let's use the Steelers-Ravens from yesterday. if you took the money line of each of those games live potentially in a very close, circumstance of the game, you might have one book paying 2.1 for the Ravens to win, and potentially one book paying 2.05 for the Steelers to win. So by betting $100 on each of those, on one side you would profit $10 for your 200, and on the other side you would profit $5 for your 200.
Yeah.
And you couldn't lose. There's no circumstance that would exist where you could lose. If that game ended in a tie, you'd get your $200 back and wouldn't have any profit. But you're exposed to no risk whatsoever in that example, right?
Right, yeah. And I think that one thing that people need to understand about arb betting is that it's much lower return on investment. I mean, more often than not, you see bigger players wagering huge amounts of money on it. So if you're starting off and you're trying to build your bankroll, arbing isn't going to be like a rocket ship or jet fuel to get you going, but it is a surefire way if you spot opportunities along the way, even with inplayLIVE, as we kind of point out sometimes, to bolster those units and just to add a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's you like you said, you can look at every single game out there and probably find an arb bet, but there's also key games and key situations where it becomes
more
profitable.
Right.
And I think going back to things we've harped on in the past about having access to multiple books, having a big tool belt in that sense, having funded accounts is so important if you're going to look at something like arbing, because then you have the opportunity to make that decision on the spot and dive in on any chance that jumps at you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think, like, arbing as a whole, it's something that I don't really do. But it's something that's really awesome to have practice with and have it in the sports value analyst tool belt.
Yeah.
So that you know when it really makes sense to strike. Because arbitrage as a whole is just a surefire way to close your account.
Yeah.
Right? And the thing is I know you're going to touch on this, but arb calculators, right? They will spit out for you to wager $32.44 on one side. And when you bet uneven amounts on an arbitrage wager, you go, a red flag goes off in your account, right? Where they will just close you before you've even gotten the ship moving.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, he's only betting on arbitrage. We don't want him here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the most recent one I can think of was the election for me. We touched on that before.
Yeah, no, it's a huge one.
But I got Biden and Trump at anywhere from 2.7, which is plus 170 in American odds, to 3.0, which is plus 200, to win all the swing states, all of them. Like Ohio, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, all of them. It was crazy. It was like this one moment in the election where that happened. And the thing is like I said, just having that arbitrage knowledge in your tool belt just makes an easy way to strike when you really see the surefire opportunities.
Yeah.
The election, like, I don't know much about that stuff, right? So, but that was just easy for me. But when it comes to sports, usually one of those numbers is very, very wrong.
Yeah, and what I would draw the election to on a sports side is in the election there's so many variables and unknowns that these books aren't handicapping it well. Like you're just seeing numbers that don't make any sense, right?
Right.
And where that might translate is into like smaller or mid-market basketball or football, college games, things like that, where you see books that are kind of, we've talked about that, the opportunities that come from hundreds of thousands of teams and games and players that nobody knows anything about, right?
And one algorithm being blanketed to the whole sport.
Yeah. And just being like, so the politics is a great example of books not knowing how to handicap something.
Yeah.
And then opportunities arising.
Yeah.
And those are gold mine arbing, because it's like you're basically getting a value wager on top of an arb, right? So it's like a double dip.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. What are a couple of the pitfalls of arbing? Number one is the exact bet, right? Let's call it that. So when you put into an arb calculator, I want to make X, people fall into the mistake of putting a decimal point or a exact wager on both sides. That's a huge flag, obviously, right?
Yeah.
You've said that time and time again. So I think that as a piece of advice, if someone's doing that, it's like, look to make a rough amount and make your unit wagers flat. Don't do something that's completely like spiking your behavioral change through the books, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Like, if let's say that you're trying to make $100 profit on the arb, and one side's going to give you 95.43 and the other side's going to give you 101.22.
Who cares?
Who cares if that means you wagered round and even amounts?
Yeah.
Right?
And you still make your 80 to 100% of a unit anyways, right? It is a sure bet, so don't worry about the exact stuff. Right?
There's a couple of live, they're not true arbitrage plays, because a true arbitrage play covers all outcomes. You can't lose.
Yeah.
Right? There's a few arbitrage plays that we use at inplayLIVE where they're on the same book in the same situation of a game. In those circumstances, what's really, really nice is I can click on those two results, place the amount of money in for both at the same time, place bet, so click on place bet, and both of those wagers place at the same time.
Yeah.
And if for whatever reason one of the two odds changed, neither of those wagers are placed, which leads to the biggest pitfall of arbitrage. You're using two separate books.
Or you should be.
Well,
that should be subsection B.
At least two separate books to compare their odds to each other.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing is getting flipped upside down, where you place a wager on one side and either the odds change on the other side or you don't even get the wager in at all.
Yeah.
And you're exposed to one of those sides, your side losing, and you're losing the whole amount. And because you think it's free money from betting on arbitrage, you then maybe place too much of a wager that you couldn't afford, thinking that you were going to get profit back in return, and you end up losing it all. So let me paint you a perfect picture of this, okay? You're looking for arbitrage situations at odds of 2.1, 2.2, which is plus 110, plus 120, where the other side is similar, plus 110, plus 120, right?
Pretty thin.
You bet $500, let's just say, on both sides, right? So you've risked a total of $1,000, and you're receiving back about $10 for every 100 wagered. So you're getting back about 10% of your one side. 5% total. Total, right? So in the case of getting 5% back total, if you get flipped upside down for $500, now you need to obviously hit 20 of those in a row just to get back to even.
Right. That pokes a huge hole in your hot air balloon if you're trying to build a bankroll, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you have to have a system in place to make sure that if you aren't able to cover your side, you either take a small loss or you figure out a way to get out of it with no profit, just to save yourself from those scenarios. Because the thing is again, if you were listening to this right now and you're like, oh, this is really cool, I want to start doing arbitrage betting, I want to try this. You could find yourself in that situation not once, but 5 or 10 times in your first few sessions doing it.
Yeah.
Because you're not experienced with it, and then all of a sudden you're in huge trouble.
Yeah.
Right? So you really do want to look for the opportunities. Maybe they're on timeouts in the game that you're playing. Maybe they're
at halftime or quarter or whatever. Usually, and I think Kenny touched on that in the last podcast we had him, was especially if you're kind of just getting into this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Wait till a break in the action so that you can make sure you get your bet in. And especially, different books have different countdowns or timers, different ways that they accept or change bets. Like you said, on 365, if one of your selections changes, then neither of them go through. On some books, they'll take one and not give you the other.
Yeah.
So you really, really, really got to focus in, and I think that's part of your due diligence, right? Is learning how that book works.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, it's a good strategy if you want to make sure money, but it's not exactly free. You do have to learn the ins and outs of it.
Well, this is actually included in our inplayLIVE curriculum. We touch on this, right? And one of the biggest things that I say is that when you find arbitrage opportunities, one of those two numbers, or in some cases 3 numbers or 4 numbers, because you can do it with more than 2 selections, right?
Yeah.
As long as you cover all the outcomes.
Right.
One of them is wrong. You've actually found a value wager, and chances are that book that you found that on handicaps a similar situation like that on a regular basis. So I'll give you guys a quick story.
Yeah.
Right? The NHL, they went from 4-on-4 overtime to 3-on-3 overtime. And when it comes to sports betting, there's consistent ways you can make money over time, and then there's short-term opportunities that won't last very long.
Right.
BWin left the odds for NHL overtime as if it was 4-on-4. So in 4-on-4 hockey, the odds of it going to shootout and you not scoring a goal in that 5-minute overtime window in the NHL are actually very likely. Whereas in 3-on-3, as you know, it's crazy.
The scoring was exponential, and that was the whole purpose of the rule.
Yeah,
was to end games without a shootout.
So there was unbelievable odds on either team to score a goal in the 5-minute window on 3-on-3 and B-win. And then on another book, you could take the game to go to overtime and easily cover off the 3 outcomes. Sorry, not overtime, to shootout.
Right.
To easily cover off the 3 opportunities. And there's a few different ways to look at this. You could go, okay, this is an amazing arbitrage opportunity. I can use any generic mainstream book, like Bet365 as a perfect example, to be the backbone of extracting the profit out of B-win, where I'm consistently making money from B-win and probably consistently losing on Bet365, but overall I'm locking in a profit every single time these teams go to overtime. Okay? In the 3-on-3 format that they had. The other option is you go, I know that B-win is inadequately handicapping the goal, and you literally know in 3-on-3 hockey, does it matter which team is better? Yes, but like it is a coin flip.
Yeah.
So what I was doing is I was just taking the underdog to win in overtime on B-win and nothing else.
Right.
And at a round even amount, and keeping my account open and not arbing the whole play together. So I guess what I'm saying is with arbitrage, it's such a great way to train your brain to have found value, because what you're doing is comparing other books.
Yeah.
Right? And when you have a jump out number like that, you know that one book has inadequately handicapped it, right?
Yeah, so, and then if you track it and stat it out, and it turns out that you're hitting at a clip that is profitable with a value wager especially, you're probably going to increase that ROI double, triple what an arbitrage opportunity would return long term, right?
Potentially, yes.
If you're onto something, right?
Yeah.
If you're on, like,
and like I remember, so it was when was it last season it switched to 3-on-3 or the season before? I think it was the season before.
2 years ago, yeah.
So when that opportunity, it was just one day you open it up and you're like this, damn, it's gone, and that's just the way it is, right? Yeah. It's gone, it's over. So
changing landscape.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's a pretty good summary of it, and I think that the takeaway there is part of that practice teaches you to watch lines, watch books, watch things that are going on, and as a sports bettor, period, that's a really good skill to have.
Yeah.
Because the second you see something, it could be gone in 3 steamboats, 5 steamboats, right? But if you see something and it makes sense, you got to be ready to jump.
But on top of that, we get this constantly. Oh, I don't like this book. I don't like the way it looks or feels.
Yeah.
And it's like, we don't like it either, but we're so experienced with looking at all these books that we can look at a market right away and know, will that win or lose in OT? Right? Like, are we gonna get our bet back if a soccer game goes past the 90th minute?
Yeah.
Are we gonna lose our wager? Like, we know when we look at a book, that number implies extra time. That number implies overtime. That number implies extra innings.
Yeah.
That number doesn't.
And then some books, the way they present 2-way versus 3-way, is there a draw involved? Even in sports like hockey or football and like quarter results, things like that, some books have draws. You got to be careful with that stuff. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And we've had it time and again inside of inplayLIVE where someone's looked at a book and gone, oh my God, the Chargers are +10 right now and they're driving. And it's a 3-way. And they're like, why did I lose this wager? And it's like, well, there's an exactly option.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to be really careful, and just the constant scanning and learning of books is obviously a huge way to ensure that you're an expert and you know what you're doing before you place the wagers. And I think that's just a great exercise where you don't need to wager at all. You can just watch games and watch books and start to learn how some of this stuff works.
Especially if you're new to it. Right?
But then there's a lot of pros, right? That we at inplayLIVE, we are so big on love and passion of sports and capitalizing on the opportunities we find in game. So there's still this core element where we're still actually cheering for something, right? Whereas a lot of professional sports bettors, you could actually argue they've taken the sport out of the practice, and all of a sudden the sports aren't on, and it's just the books,
right?
And it's finding those opportunities in the books, and then you look at it and you go, okay, this is all data, numbers, spreadsheets, very much like stock trading, and not so much about sports.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely a fun part. I know as the leader of the streams, of the company, of the team, of the vision, it's like just to hear you yelling and screaming at results that you're still winning, but just like the passion, it doesn't matter what it is, just getting into it.
Yeah.
And that's such a fun part of it.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think that it's so contagious, right?
Yeah. Bob.
We've developed nicknames for players and like drives and like finding our Bob and that sort of stuff, right? And just like, it's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about hedging, because I know they kind of tend to fall in the same conversation.
Yeah.
But they are very different, right?
Yeah.
Do not make that mistake. So hedging, as opposed to arbing, we're covering off all the outcomes. Hedging is when you already have one of the outcomes, right?
Yeah.
So an example would be a pregame underdog, or like a big plus, or maybe you have a parlay you put together that had 3 or 4 picks and you're down to your last pick.
Yeah.
But essentially what there is there's one outcome left to cover, and you make money, right? Mm-hmm. So hedging, you have to look at now a whole different world of decisions as to what am I doing to try and guarantee a profit, if at all, right?
Right.
So being the person you are, more often than not, you would say, I don't usually hedge because I make enough value wagers that I don't really want to worry about that. I'm okay with just losing it or taking the full profit.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at hedging, what does that mean? Like, how do you cover off your hedge and decide, what do I want to win versus give up, right? What's your thought process?
Well, so many books have the cash out feature.
Yeah.
Right? And when you cash out, you just essentially, you did the easy hedge, right? Rather than placing the other side, you said, just give me my money now.
Yeah.
Right? And like, as a general statement, there are exceptions to this 100%. When you press the cash out button, as a general statement, the books just went, thank you.
Yes.
Because essentially you just took a bet again with another VIG, with another profitability to the house, and said, I give up. You guys can have the profit that I should have had, as a general statement. So they calculate in those cash outs that when you press that button over time, they made more on you than if you let it ride.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So typically, you can hedge instead of cashing out for a tiny bit more profit than the cash out itself. But again, it's usually tiny.
Yeah.
Right? So I get this constantly, right? Like 4 or 5 leg parlays, right? Where people are like, should I cash out? And, in any sport, there's a timeline associated with the day. So maybe it's the NFL where you had 3 picks in the morning and you had a pick in the afternoon, and it all comes down to the night game, right? And you got Aaron Rodgers to win against the Bears on Sunday night. And, people are like, should I cash out? And I always say, why did you make the bet in the first place?
Yeah.
Right? So you knowingly added Aaron Rodgers, knowing that if all of that came through, you would need the Packers to win to cover.
Yeah.
Next time, if you're thinking about cashing out or hedging, next time, just don't put them on the bet, and you would have made more money. Right?
Yeah.
If it's a chronological parlay. Right?
Yeah.
I'd say if it's one later game or one day in the future or one pick in the future relative to all the other picks, why did you even put it on in the first place?
Yeah.
Right? So
hit your other one and then bet that one the next time or something, right?
But as a general rule, I don't hedge. There are some times where I do. There are some times where cashing out makes so much sense. We had Will Dissly's under on receiving yards. I think it was under 12 yards. And he had 0 yards heading into the fourth quarter, and they were giving us 99% of our money. I told everyone, cash out right now.
And sorry, to clarify, that's not 99% of your wager, that's 99% of the return.
Of the return.
Yeah.
They were giving us
without having even
yes.
done any of his job or really come close, if you will, right?
And Will Dissly went for, I think, 40 yards in the fourth quarter. And that has nothing to do with it. Yeah. It's the fact that, in that particular case, the Seahawks were down. When you're down, you're more likely to air the ball out and throw to people.
Yeah.
When you're in adverse situations where, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett might be getting all the coverage, a guy like Dissly might break free for 10 or 15 yards, and that's all it takes to one catch and you lose your wager.
Yeah.
So in that circumstance, it made tons of sense. I remember having the Washington Wizards to beat the Boston Celtics. This is years ago. I think you were with me and we both had it. We were at Cactus Club on Broadway in Granville, and it was the Celtics were down 3 with 9 seconds left, and they were giving us like 99%. And Isaiah Thomas just pulled up from like 10 feet behind the arc, dropped a 3, and they won in overtime. And I remember thinking, not like, that's a situation where I'm telling a story where I cashed out and it made I won because I cashed out.
Yeah.
But there's tons of stories where you could cash out and it goes the other way.
Yeah.
I think there's just, what I'm trying to get at here is there's a very rare circumstance where you look at the money and you go, this team could easily lose and they're giving me this much. Right? That's where, those are the rare circumstances where usually I'll look and I'll go, oh my God, like it's still another 20%, or it's still another 10%, or it's still another 30% that they're giving me in this situation. I'm going to hang on. And if I lose, I lose.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, I think hedging, which is of course then when you're actually placing another wager. Yeah. Right? To secure your profit. That's something I've definitely done throughout this season in certain circumstances, but I tend not to do it on the main markets. I haven't hedged money lines or spreads.
Yeah, that's more if you're betting pregame would be more applicable.
Yeah.
Where the player props fall under quite a lot is they are pregame, and that's why we're able to apply that strategy sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've used hedging opportunities where I've got a really good live value wager where maybe I got it at 8 or even 20 to 1, and let's say the long shot thing that needed to happen in that game already happened. And now, given that it's such a long odd, like 8 or 20, like huge odds, 8 to 1 or higher, I'm like, okay, in this circumstance, I want to extract value out of that wager that I already made.
Right.
So I'm going to now look at ways to get out of it, securing maybe half of, instead of getting the 8 to 1, maybe now, because I'm placing another wager, I got 4 to 1 or 4 to 10 to 1 in the 8 to 20 example. But again, as a general rule, I think a lot of people think, oh, now they say this, if it comes to this, then I'll just hedge. I just say don't do it. Yeah. As a general rule, like we certainly do, but I would just say don't do it as a whole.
Well, and when you talk about the stuff we're doing in play as well, that's like, if you find a really a value wager that's been stretched out to even like extra value wager, we'll call it, right? Like where you've got a long odd. Yeah. And now all of a sudden that odd has come down and down and down and fallen off a cliff to a point where it's like you've already extracted like 2 value wagers out of it, or a full value wager out of it. That's a whole different circumstance because you identified an opportunity that now has kind of come to fruition, and so you can still win, but you've already won, if you will. Right?
Yeah, and then that comes back. It's something we've talked about a lot. Player and team motivations. Is your wager still completely in line with their motivation? Right? Like a perfect example of this would be at the end of a game, knowing when or when not teams will and won't kick field goals. That's a perfect example. And motivations are so evident when you look at the score. Is the team down 10? Will they kick? Absolutely. They don't want to, but they will, right? And there's so many things like that across so many different sports. Yeah. Right? In baseball, extra innings, leadoff single. Well, why are they bunting? Right? And there's ways that you can capitalize on live sports betting when you look at, they're actually trying to move the runner right now. They're sacrificing an out to move the runner. Mm-hmm. Whether you agree with them doing that or not, knowing when teams do these things.
What does Brad Pitt say? They want to give you an out? Take the out. Yeah. Say thank you.
Yeah. Throw it to first, say thank you. Yeah, exactly. Don't look at second. Take the ball, throw it to first, say thank you. It's the best. Yeah. But yeah, exactly, right? So just understanding what teams do in different circumstances across all sports is where you can look at, having these potentially amazing wagers and going, it makes perfect sense to hedge something right now versus it doesn't make sense at all because I know what this team is going to do in this circumstance to a certain degree of certainty, right? Yeah.
Well, and also when you're making wagers within play in the drives, in the games, that circumstance can change as time starts to run out, as those motivations combine with things, and so it's evolving. The wager's evolving not only since you took it was a good time, but then as things shift, you might now have an opportunity to say, okay, this situation has completely changed from when I took the wager. And so now it would make sense to say, okay, well, if I look at it now, the wager's not good anymore going forward. So I can cash out on my good wager and capitalize on that decision, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So that's kind of, but I mean, that's a whole different world of hedging, and it's more applicable to strategically taking long value wagers.
Yeah,
right?
if you're I think if you're hedging your parlays and stuff, my rationale is why did you bet it in the first place?
Yeah, and for us, it's usually parlays are associated with rec betting, and if it's rec betting, then you just want to hit the home run anyways, right?
Yeah.
You never see a YouTube video about the guy who won 85 of his 10 grand. He's bragging about it, right? He's like, I hit my parlay here, right? But anyways, I think that covers it. We talked about some of the dangers of arbing and things like that. You know, making sure you learn the books, learn the odds, learn how they operate, placing your bets at the same time, not using exact bets, things like that. For hedging as a general rule, kind of stay away from it, really. Like, if you're placing a good wager, then it's a good wager. So you want to win it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. I think that's something that we should do in the near future is we should do a special on the player props. That'd be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Because that's been something we've been exploring a little bit more lately, right? So
big time.
Yeah. Anyways, what do we got coming up this week? We've got no Thursday night football tonight, so bit of a breather, bit of college, but this weekend we'll be live all day Saturday. Kenny will be live for Inplay Pro Sunday.
He's live tonight for NCAA basketball.
A little bit of hoops tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So people have been diving into that. And it should be a full slate Sunday, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, awesome stuff. NCAA football, UFC, NFL, NCAA basketball. It's been awesome. It's going to keep going. We got NBA starting up December 22nd and NHL January 1st. So that's literally now right around the corner because we're in December now, which is super awesome. We have amazing content for both of those sports, which is just, it's fun.
Do you guys have a date for that yet, for when it's going to drop?
Usually a couple days before the season starts, all the content's back out.
3 weeks or so, we'll probably see some NBA content. That'll be fun.
Yeah, so I know you were going to touch on Pinnacle. Pinnacle is an awesome odds calculator for arbitrage. I know some people, if you are looking to bet arbitrage, again, it's not something we focus on. It's just something that's in our tool belt. You can make your own calculator on Excel. There's an awesome one on Pinnacle that you can use. We'll post a link to Pinnacle, which is a great book to have, I think, for everyone betting pregame. From an arbitrage standpoint, most books don't want you around. Pinnacle's awesome, right? Because they're the book that says they'll never shut you down. They'll never restrict you. They'll never limit you. Winners are welcome. So they play into that so much that they believe their lines, and I think they are as well, are sharper than anyone else, while still offering better odds a lot of times.
Yeah.
So it's a great book. And what's really cool is they basically encourage you to arbitrage because they believe their side is the side that will make them money over time, and you'll be extracting money from the other books. So they encourage you to arb through them. They provide you. They provide you with a calculator and all the tools to an education on how to do it. So we'll post a link to Pinnacle if you guys want to learn a little bit more about them.
Yeah, and as always, go to Instagram, go to Facebook, follow inplayLIVE, go to iTunes and Spotify if you want to listen, and click the like and subscribe button. If you want to join in for the live streams tonight or this weekend, come and join us. Use the promo code Ritzker Podcast, and you get 40% off of your membership. So we'll see you around the corner.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah.
And gals.